What are the extraordinary methods of learning here? Before revealing, let's talk about what are the typical learning methods. First of all, one of the typical learning methods is learning in Chinese. Learning in Chinese causes two main problems. The first problem is that you have less exposure to English. The second problem is that when learning in Chinese, it's inevitable to code switch. So what is code switch? Code switch is a common language phenomenon in which a person uses more than one language alternately in a discourse. Although code switching can help us learn a new language from scratch, it's almost impossible for us to acquire a standard accent through it, because when code switching, the discourse will be dominated by a language. Other languages in the discourse are assimilated by the dominant language. For example, 可唔可以俾包酥餃我? Because the discourse is dominated by Cantonese, the English word sugar is assimilated by Cantonese. Since Cantonese has no sh sound, sugar is changed to suga. Other examples include many Taiwanese will pronounce Instagram, IG, as IG. Many Chinese speakers will pronounce game as gam, down as dan. In fact, this is inevitable, because if we pronounce it right, it would sound strange. And usually, the dominant language is our mother tongue, so the language we want to learn will be assimilated by our mother tongue, making it easy to have an accent. So, if you want to have a standard American accent, we should learn in English as much as possible. Then, many typical learners think you can distinguish different sounds and speak standardly just by listening and speaking more. I'll tell you it's right if you haven't passed puberty. Because as we get older, our ear's sensitivity worsens, with the most obvious decline after infancy and puberty. So after puberty, it's impossible to learn new sounds by just listening more through our ears. And if you can't even hear them correctly, how can you pronounce them correctly? So it's not hard to figure out why many Japanese people can't tell the difference between ra and la. After understanding the weakening of hearing after puberty, we should analyze it more from a linguistic point of view and let you recognize sounds with the sense of your mouth instead of just your ears. Another typical learning method is that they advocate copying notes and reviewing them frantically. This happens because most people believe that this method makes it easier for your brain to remember things, but that's not true. There are two main types of memory, long-term and short-term. Due to copying and reviewing the notes frantically, the brain will think that the information is readily available and can be reviewed repeatedly. So the brain does not summarize this information as long-term memory, but as short-term memory that can be reviewed easily. And it would take too much time to turn information into long-term memory through frantic repetition. It takes weeks, months, or even years. The opposite method is to be very attentive when absorbing, but do not copy notes. At most, just write down where to find the information. Don't try to review it until the next day. Try to recall it in your mind, and it's not a problem if you can't recall it at the moment. Although this method will make it less easy for you to recall the information in the short term, it will stimulate your brain to make your brain think that the information is important and summarize it as long-term memory. Therefore, these extraordinary learning methods are learning in English as much as possible, utilizing linguistics and your oral sense to recognize sounds. Do not copy the notes and try to recall it in your mind as much as possible. I hope you can put aside those typical learning methods, accept these extraordinary learning methods, and make your learning more effective.